Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall on the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today is Rick Kidder. He's the co-CEO of One SouthCoast Chamber. Thanks for joining us.
Jim, thanks for having me today. This has been challenging times, but it's great to be able to sit down and talk with you.
Lots of, as you said, this has been an unbelievable circumstance for everybody here. I know
Sure.
that. Tell us a little bit, first of all, tell us about the Chamber. I mean,
Sure.
we haven't talked to you since the merger with Bristol County, or Bristol. So tell us a little bit how that's going.
Sure. First of all, the Chamber, the New Bedford Chamber, was actually founded in 1885. So we've been around through a lot of challenges within our community, everything from the end of textiles and the end of the whaling days, through changes that took us through the Depression and took us through world wars. We've been through a lot, and we're going to continue to be through a lot. But the Chamber came together with the Bristol County Chamber, which used to be called the Fall River Chamber, came together with them. We spent about a year working on merger documents and how we could come together. We did come together effective January 1, 2020, and then the world changed.
Yeah.
But here we are together. We are now the second largest chamber in the Commonwealth with more than 1,500 members, and we are an integral part of the communication link for businesses to make sure that they can get through this pandemic situation well.
And prior to the pandemic situation, I mean, the South Coast was really experiencing a growth business-wise, it seems.
Absolutely. In fact, we expect that to happen again. We're very optimistic about the future. We know that with the challenges that we have now, that there will be some setbacks, but we've been experiencing some exponential growth. If you look at our downtown area in New Bedford, 10 years ago, you could have rolled a bowling ball down Purchase Street and hit next to nothing. Now, all of a sudden, you've got these vibrant stores. There's more and more happening in the housing area.
Hotels.
Yeah. So we're starting to see a resurgence in New Bedford that we expect to pick up again once we get past this challenge.
Is that something, I mean, in your experience business-wise, when you see growth happening, and I know that especially downtown you notice it, and even in the north end too, of Christian Ave, whenever you see businesses, you see the momentum, and then you have this just stop completely. And is it hard to get it back, do you think?
You know, it'll be hard to get it back depending upon how our phase-in goes. It's going to take, I think what surprised a lot of people was that it took less than a month, really, when you think about it, between shutting down and all of a sudden there were job losses, there were furloughs, there were layoffs. Things started to grind a bit to a halt. And I think almost everyone was surprised at how quickly economically things began to unravel. That being said, I don't think it's going to pick up again at the same pace at which it dropped. But I wouldn't anticipate that once we're past this coronavirus issue, it would not surprise me if in the next year or two, we are back where we were and continuing to grow as a community.
And you talk about when, you know, things stopping suddenly. I mean, one of the things, and you and I were talking about it off camera, one of the interesting things was that got canceled right off the bat was the State of the City, which the Chamber has hosted for years. And that's an event that's hugely attended. It
is. In fact, the State of the City address in New Bedford is the second largest State of the City address in terms of attendance in the Commonwealth, behind Boston. And we've put this on since I've been here in 2015 with Mayor Mitchell each year. We are always excited about doing it because it's a tremendous event. And the mayor always does a fantastic job of putting together a good speech and looking optimistically ahead at New Bedford. That's something that we missed doing this year. Not doing the State of the City, that kind of hurt us deeply. But the mayor has indicated that he is postponing the State of the City address, not canceling it. And so it's important for us that once things begin to return to whatever we call normal, that we're able to stage that again for the mayor and for the citizens of New Bedford, because it's a great event.
And I was thinking of that. The two big events that stuck out for me right when it first happened was that and the half marathon in New Bedford, which is a big event because you've got thousands of people downtown, and obviously business-wise, that's a huge day for them. It is, and when you look at the half marathon, you start looking at a bunch of different things that take place, like the half marathon, and we put on Chowder Fest each year. Yep. We've got 4,000 people who come out to Chowder Fest. It's a fantastic event.
That's normally scheduled in October. We try to schedule it when the pats are dark so that we can maximize the potential there. But the reality for that is we don't know at this point where we'll be in October. We don't know whether people's appetite to gather is going to be there. But more importantly is not just what happens at Chowderfest and not just what happens for the runners in the New Bedford Half Marathon, but our downtown gets flooded with folks.
Yeah.
Our businesses get flooded with folks when those events take place, and so it's good for the entire economy of the region.
And they showcase the city.
And
I mean,
they
it's
do.
Just, you know,
it does. I mean, it shows us off. I live down in the South End near where your studios are, so I always get an opportunity to go out and watch the half marathon. My half marathon days are long past, except as a fan. But then I always go downtown and see the vibrant economic impact that it has.
And that's the one thing that you see in New Bedford, and I think Fall River's the same way too. Is people are very, very proud of their city, and they do show up for events.
They do.
that are staple events too.
Correct. You know, it's funny when there was an opportunity at one point for downtown New Bedford Inc. used to run Chowderfest. And they were kind of going out of that business and more into the business of marketing downtown per se. And so what they decided to do was not do that event. When people heard about the fact that there might not be a Chowderfest, there was an outpouring. People really love these community events, and we are so lucky as a community, whether you're talking about the Feast of the Blessed Sacrament, whether you're talking about a Chowderfest or a half marathon, our community really depends upon those as places to gather and places to have fun. We need to get back to that.
You have been working, as you were telling me, in the office every day. Tell us how the Chamber's been affected by this as an organization.
The Chamber is just like any other business, and so there isn't a business that I know of that hasn't been impacted in some way. If you look at our hospitals, they've been impacted in dramatic ways. If you look at our restaurants, they've been impacted in dramatic ways. The Chamber is no different from that. We are a 501c6 organization, and so we've been impacted because we cannot take advantage of the PPP program, which was again recently funded, so that there are more dollars out to help businesses keep their staff. So we've had to do a couple of staff reductions and some reductions in hours and reductions in salary so that we can continue our mission. And our mission is actually to serve the business community. So we push out a tremendous amount of information to our members. We try to synthesize all the stuff that people are getting from so many different sources, put it as one reliable source, either through our website, through our email communications, and then we've pivoted dramatically on the event side. About 40% of our annual revenue each year comes from events, and of course those have all been placed on hold. And the events that we do, we've now moved, many of them, we've now moved to virtual. Like many, we're using Zoom platforms, we're using Microsoft Teams. We're finding ways that we can have events and committee meetings and board meetings and do the kind of things that connect people together. Because that, at its essence, is what a chamber is about. It's about building connections between business people and the community.
I know the mayor talks about when we've had him on, and he talks so much about supporting the businesses still locally here,
yes,
and what have you. I would imagine that the need for the Chamber of Commerce has been increased because of the situation right now. You talk about 1,500 members.
Yep.
And each of them have their own needs, but it must be increasing right now.
It is. And what we're seeing is that for a lot of our members, it's caused us to do some market segmentation. We created, for example, on our Facebook page, we created a new page off of that page called SouthCoast Dining and Deals. We want to support our restaurants when they're offering deals for curbside pickup, or whether they are still doing takeout and delivery. We want to make sure that they can get their message out there so that we can support our local businesses. You know, one of the things that's dramatic is that when you support a business that's local, the vast majority of the dollars stay local. And it's important for us to continue to advocate on behalf of supporting local business. You know, there's a tile that I have in my office that actually talks about supporting local business. And when you support a local business, you're not buying an executive his second home. You're actually supporting the Little League. You're supporting all of those things that are so important to the fabric of a community.
And you told me off camera too, interestingly enough, that you are seeing people or businesses come to you now to talk about joining the chamber right now.
Absolutely. In fact, we've decided to do something that is fairly radical. It's never been done, as far as I know, within the chamber industry. Is we're going to be launching very soon, and I think by the time this airs, it will have launched. We're going to be launching very soon a free membership for any business who is currently not a member of the chamber. They can become a member of the chamber until September 1. And it may be extended beyond that, but it's an opportunity for businesses that are not connected with us to get connected and to start to use us as the resource that they so desperately need right now. People have a strong need for connectivity, and most people don't go into business in order not to see other people.
Yeah.
They go into business because they naturally want to see other people, and so we keep setting up venues for that to happen in obviously safe ways.
Talk a little bit about what sort of programs, advice that you're giving to these businesses, and I know they must be tweaked depending on what the type of business is, but what are some of the things that you're telling businesses and that you can tell people who may not be members of the chamber right now that they can do?
You know, it's interesting because the chamber itself is that proverbial jack of all trades and master of none. Where we are best is making connections for people. And that we make connections for businesses to each other so that they can do business with each other. But we may not be the one that's executing the PPP program through the banks, but we can actually get a business connected to the bank to make certain that they can go through that process easily and effectively. Or we can connect people to the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center that's based in part down at the Quest Center, and get people connected to that so that they can do their application for their emergency disaster loans. All of those things, the chamber is really that connector. It is that central piece that helps people do that. So right now, one of our primary roles as we see it is sift through the vast amount of information that's out there and make it simple. And so that we can get to businesses and help them execute, and then get people to the right people.
Is it, have you seen a lot of businesses, did they apply for the first round of stimulus locally here?
Yes. A tremendous number of businesses applied for the first round. We wish that the chamber had been eligible. We would have applied ourselves as a small business, but they're not eligible because of our tax status. But for all of the businesses that we have, we probably, as far as we can, and this is anecdotal, more than half of those businesses have filed application for the PPP support. We were part of the dollars running out really quickly, and thankfully Congress has put more dollars into it, and we're going to have to see how long that lasts. But yes, our businesses are taking advantage of it.
Have you, and I'm curious, have you seen a business that was successful in receiving the money?
Yes.
Or have you talked to anybody?
Yes.
And I don't want you to name the business, you don't have to, but I'm just, what did that do for them?
What that did for them is it allowed them to keep their people. And that was the primary thing that they were looking to do. They didn't want to lose their folks. They wanted to make sure that they could keep their employment census up. I mean, we have seen within the Commonwealth there have been close to 700,000 unemployment applications that have been filed just in the last few weeks, and there will be more. But if businesses can hold on to their folks and get that support that they need for their key things are their salary, their rent, being able to stay within their space and keep their people, that's essential. Now, some businesses like restaurants that have a service staff, they may not be able to take advantage of it as directly, but they will be able to take advantage of it once we reopen and they can get their census back up. So it's important for them to be able to do that because it provides 8 weeks of salary support.
Have you seen that the size of the business or the type of the business, is that an issue with receiving those monies from the federal government?
Well, I think we've all seen the headlines of the businesses that received help that probably shouldn't have. And among those, of course, were Harvard University, my alma mater, a shame on them. But There have been a number of businesses that have applied, and interestingly enough, some of them large businesses. Those larger businesses that employ more than 500, they're not even eligible for these programs. But in some cases, they might have been applying for their franchisees. So when you get down to, we were talking about before all of this, we started talking, the local friendlies. Yeah. The local friendlies is a franchisee with maybe 25 employees. Right. That local friendlies needs that support. So sometimes when we think of, okay, these big corporations applying, well, it's really the franchisees that are applying and how important it is that they get that support. But we have heard of a number of larger companies that have had to reduce their workforce. And they've done so with furloughs and some with layoffs. And it's going to be a time before the Titleists of the world find that there's an appetite around the world for golf balls again, because golf courses are open and people are playing, and those folks can come back. But it's going to be a long phase-in, I believe.
Rick Kidder, the co-CEO of One SouthCoast Chambers, our guest. Talk a little bit about, I mean, we've talked about the big businesses, but those small mom and pop things, and I just think of the local corner store, for crying out loud, that, and I don't know if those folks are applying for those things, but those have become, and I've read articles in the paper and online, those have become so important during this crisis, really, because for a lot of people, that's the only social activity they have. And those store owners or whatever, they know that they've got a loaf of bread or they've got the necessities that people need.
And I think it's really important that we support those small and micro businesses. I have a little store in my neighborhood. I go there often, and one of the reasons I go there often is I want to make sure that they're getting that support. And unfortunately, one of the challenges that you always run into when there are big federal programs and dollars available is that the more sophisticated the ownership or operation of the company is, the more likely they are to jump on programs like that. So if you look at the chamber membership, 85 to 90% of our members are under 25 employees. So we're trying to push that same level of sophistication out to our membership so that those small businesses can take advantage.
And I don't think people realize how many people are employed by small businesses.
Oh yeah, about 85% of the people in the country are employed by small business. When you get down to the micro business level, yes, it's a smaller percentage, but if you look at the number of micro businesses as the number of businesses nationwide, they are tenfold the number of micro businesses as there are these mid-size and larger companies. So these micro businesses are feeding families, taking care of their community. They are deeply embedded within their community, and the dollars that you spend there tend to stay local. So it's crucial that we support those folks, because without them, we don't have an economy.
And you were saying too, interestingly enough, that even the big companies being affected, you mentioned Titleist and some of the other ones that have had to do furloughs and had to take steps to stay financially solvent through this.
Right. You know, that's actually the issue. Most of the companies that have done, they haven't done layoffs because they wanted to. Nobody ever does layoffs because they want to. They do those layoffs and those furloughs so that they can actually project out what is the most important thing for every single company right now to look at. If I could give them one piece of advice, it's watch your cash. Because your cash is your most important asset right now. Because without that cash, you can't pay your people. And so all of these companies have these larger companies have sophisticated cash flow analysis. Most of us small companies are doing, okay, what's my bleed rate?
Right.
How many months do I have before I can't pay my people anymore? And so they're trying to work proactively to do some layoffs, and I have to give the Commonwealth a tremendous amount of credit for work share programs where they're able to provide some unemployment assistance for people whose hours are cut. Because if those hours get cut, then and the state can make up for a piece of that, then you can try to keep that employee as whole as possible, and it makes it a lot easier to bring them back.
You've seen stories that have just been amazing where you've got some, I guess, full-time employees who haven't lost their jobs, but they have said, I'll work 20 hours and give so-and-so 20 hours.
Absolutely.
Which is unbelievable when you see that what this crisis has done for people, really.
You know, when you look I'll look just at our organization. As I mentioned, we had to do a couple of layoffs and we did some reduction of hours for folks. But we also had 4 employees whose salaries were cut relatively dramatically. And all of this is so that we can watch our cash and make sure that we can continue to survive and employ these folks in the long term. I had one of my employees come to me and say, hey, we're still doing publications, we're still doing communications, we get sponsorship dollars for that, and part of my compensation is commissions on sales of those ads. Said, I don't want to take commissions anymore. I don't want any more commission dollars coming in. It is more important right now that the organization stay solid than I get those few bucks. And we're seeing that all over the place, and I think it's happening in companies all over.
Yeah, big and small.
Big and small.
Yeah. And you and I were talking about it too. There's a lot of good stories out there.
Yes, there are.
It's a tough time. There's no question about it. But you're seeing companies pivot. You're seeing small business, big business pivot. You know, I mentioned a couple of things, you know, in my office there prior to talking. But as you said, there's a lot of good stories out there.
There's some tremendous stories out there. If you look at what Merrow is doing in Fall River and Matook in Fall River, and what's happening at Joseph Abood in New Bedford, and what's happening at Darnett in New Bedford. They have sewing machines. They have the ability to create and make things. They have pivoted in order to keep a hold of more of their workforce into making things that are necessary for hospitals, making gowns, making masks for the population. They may not be N95 masks. Those are hard to come by because they can't get the materials to manufacture those. But they have turned around their business to make sure that they can manufacture the things that our first responders need, because they're on the front lines. Jim, you and I are mercifully lucky. We have our jobs, we continue to work, but we're not working with the infirm right now. We're not working with the sick. And those folks need as much support as we can. And one of our small businesses run by a man named Brad Simmons, who is the Simmons Insurance Group. They reside in the office right below us. They're also an Aflac company. What he's doing is putting together Feed Our First Responders programs. And they're collecting dollars, and companies are putting in money, and they're doing that all through our Chamber Foundation as a way that they can do tax-deductible donations and responsible outpouring of the money. So that we can give a great meal and a thank you to our police, our fire, our hospital workers. We're going to start in New Bedford. We're going to move it then to Dartmouth, to Westport, to Fall River. All of these programs are designed by one guy who runs an insurance company who wants to do something for the community that he loves.
And you see that too, and I've talked to people and read the articles about restaurants that are donating food, and I mean, and they're struggling, and yet they're still doing that, and hotels that are giving space for first responders and medical folks.
And we're going to probably need to see even more of that, because as we know, our schools are closed for the remainder of the year. And even when businesses start to open, we're going to run into some significant child care issues, where people aren't going to be able to return to work because their children who are at school are now at home, where people who want to work aren't going to be able to work. And in our communities, we've got to be able to find ways to address some of those issues. And frankly, for many in our community, the meals that they get through the schools, these kids may be the most nutritious and best meals that they get over the course of their day and their week. And the schools have done a remarkable job of continuing to provide food for families so that these kids can continue to eat. But we need the community to rally behind that. They're going to need to rally behind childcare. They're going to need to rally behind meals for our kids, because if you don't get a nutritious meal, you don't eat. And I have to give an awful lot of credit to the Community Foundation of Southeastern Mass, who's working with the United Way in New Bedford and Fall River in putting together a fund which is now in excess of $1.2 million to help in supporting these vulnerable populations.
We only got a couple minutes left, but I wanted you to talk about briefly, just to reemphasize, I guess, something that the mayor talks about, and I mentioned it briefly too, is that support the businesses as much as you can right now. How important is it? And it's not going to, every little bit, I guess, helps right now.
Right. And it's funny. We all need to support our local businesses, and we should support them
in the best of times.
Year round, in the best of times.
Yeah.
Because our local businesses are where we get great service. Our local businesses, even if it's something that you could get online someplace else for $1 or $2 cheaper, we get the service of being able to walk in and knowing that those dollars stay local. So we're going to push and push and push folks as much as they can to support these local businesses, many of whom are struggling to stay afloat. And a few dollars can make a difference, and it can make a dramatic difference, because a few dollars paid here goes to pay somebody else who is here. It goes to help in salaries. It gets to help that business stay afloat. And the strength of our community is going to be out of that small business community. New Bedford is not a community with 50 Fortune 500 companies having their headquarters here. Our backbone is that small business.
Yep.
So I would ask all of your viewers, go out, find a small business to support, knowing that those small businesses need you now more than ever before.
For people who would like some information or talk to you,
Sure.
what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is by email. It's rkidder, Kidder, at onesouthcoast.com. Our website is onesouthcoast.com as well, so if anybody wants to go to our website, they may do so. And our phone number is 508-999-5231. And somebody will be there, because all of our calls are forwarded out to our staff.
So that even the businesses that, especially with the recently passed stimulus, if they do have, looking for the contact information that you were talking about,
we're here to help them.
They can get it out. It was great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and giving us some good information, and we will hopefully chat with you soon with better times ahead, for sure.
Yes, indeed, and perhaps with less social distancing, but it's been a pleasure, Jim, and thank you very much.
Rick Kidder, the co-CEO of One South Coast Chamber, has been our guest. Thank him for his time, and we appreciate it. That's going to do it for this edition of the program. We will see you again very soon.